Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, Amy, Joan, and myself will be presenting you with the process of assessing and intervening in regards to workplace stress from the point of view of three psychological faculties. My name is Alexandra, and today my focus will be discussing forensic psychology approaches to workplace stress with you. Before we begin, however, what exactly is workplace stress? Heads Up, an Australian online mental health resource for individuals and employers, has described workplace stress as being a shortfall between an individual's abilities, their personal and employment resources, and the lack of support provided to us in the workplace, contributing to us not performing to the best of our ability. Sometimes, this is due to a personal inexperience and lack of understanding. However, it can also be narrowed down to the lack of education and preparedness in the workplace during initial employment and even spanning our time with the organization. Workplace stress can be reflected in physical and or non-physical symptoms. It is these non-physical symptoms that we will be focusing on today. Colligan and Higgins describe some of the most common non-physical symptoms as increased anxiety, worry, frustration, hostility, and the inability to concentrate, as well as the confusion and many other factors. The Australian Psychological Society clearly describes forensic psychologists as science practitioners who apply their knowledge in psychological theory and skills to the legal system. The most common areas in which individuals work are the civil, criminal, and family justice systems here in Australia as well as internationally. Whilst this is a special registration of psychology, which requires a more in-depth study, the opportunities are quite broad within the discipline. This scope of knowledge means that psychologists can interact with many different individuals such as plaintiffs, defendants, government bodies, community organizations, or even individuals throughout private practice. For today's presentation, I will be focusing on the impact of workplace stress in our emergency services, in particular our current serving police officers. In comparing the workplace of a police officer to an individual who works in an office-based setting, it is easy to understand why police officers have relatively high rates of workplace stress in comparison to other careers. Dealing with violent altercations, death, aggression, and harassment on a daily basis can negatively impact individuals, no matter how resilient they believe they are. With all workplace stress situations, the consequences of workplace stress are not typically limited to one person. The challenges associated with a colleague, a friend, or a family member who's suffering from workplace stress typically has a ripple effect, and others will notice the effects of this stress too. In the role of a police officer, this effect could touch their colleagues, their friends and family, or even the wider scope of the community in which they serve. As mentioned previously, the inability to concentrate is a major symptom of workplace stress, a factor which may have greater ramifications in regards to policing, as opposed to other careers. This inability to concentrate, or even some absent-mindedness, can create a major problem for police officers due to some of the dangerous situations they're placed in. Avoidant coping is another common result of workplace stress, which may be heightened in a relatively unpredictable job such as policing or corrections. This coping technique allows individuals to stay away from triggering situations, which may remind them of prior experiences that they would want to actively avoid. Officers, however, will more than likely be placed in a negative situation again, and thus the seamless transition through these experiences is key to ensure the safety of all parties involved. By now, we're all familiar with the vast number of personality assessments at our disposal as psychologists, and forensic psychology is no different. There are a large number of personality assessments which are used regularly in court, corrections, or private practice settings. Let's talk about some of these now. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, 2nd edition, is a self-administered personality test which assesses the personality patterns and psychosocial stressors and the severity of disturbance upon an individual. These individual scores are based on a range of true and false responses to a number of personality and experience questions, which are then scored according to the inventory requirements. The benefits of this assessment in regards to workplace stress is the way in which it categorizes 10 different factors of human behavior, such as depression, social introversion, hypochondriasis, and other factors. This enables the assessor to have a well-rounded view of the individual's psychological well-being and how stress may be impacting their personal and professional performance. The Rorschach Inkblot Test. Many of us would be familiar with the dramatization of this test in film and television. However, the predictive tendencies of the Inkblot test enable qualified assessors to have an insight into the personality and emotional functioning of an individual. As with any administered assessment, an individual must be trained on how to administer it correctly and efficiently, as to ensure the desired result is measured. The Rorschach test is no different because of the way the assessment is open to interpretation. The initial response by the client will be further elaborated on as they will be asked how they came to the conclusion about the image presented, and these responses will be compiled by the psychologist, and a profile of the individual and their psychological tendencies will be created. This test has been used by international agencies to assess the suitability of an individual's acceptance onto the force and their performance post-trauma. Now that we are aware of some of the most common psychological assessments used by forensic psychologists, we can continue on much the same way any other psychological faculty would, to intervention. With typical stress responses, removing the cause for concern, or the stressor, is the obvious solution. However, in considering the cause of the client's issue being workplace stress, more than likely this isn't a feasible solution. Therefore, coping mechanisms to work on with the client and or their own support network may be beneficial in this instance. Psychoeducation is a basis for supportive intervention for the individual. In this method, we would work with the client and their own chosen support network, be it their family, their friends, or their colleagues, or everyone, to create a treatment plan where the individual can spearhead their well-being through targeted treatment plans with the support of those around them. This treatment, as well as supplementary resources, can also be provided to caregivers, employers, and other members of the support group with the client's consent. As mentioned, due to the nature of policing, workplace stress is a common factor within the ranks. And because of this, working together with local area commands, the incorporation of a support system throughout the stations, this may enhance the individual's coping mechanisms as well as the station's ability to better function as a communicative team. In the unfortunate circumstance that these interventions are not effective, as prior research suggests, it is imperative that the individual has access to a supportive network that would best assist them in overcoming or coping with their perceived stress. This includes, but is not limited to, the referral onto another discipline of psychology, which may be able to better treat the underlying issues. This multidisciplinary approach may also enhance the treatment and ensure that the client has all aspects of their professional and personal life assessed in a manner in which their employment would not be a polarizing factor. I will now hand over to my colleague Amy, who will discuss the clinical psychology viewpoint of workplace stress. Thank you.